Good day. My name is Judy, and I am the College of Law's Wellbeing Coordinator at the University of Saskatchewan. I'm here today to talk to you about mooting, which has a rich history in our college supporting experiential learning for law students of all kinds. I'm going to present you with a 5-part video series to support well-being, mental health, managing stress, looking at conflict, having difficult conversations, and sometimes dealing with what is known as that doom spiral that we can experience when we're in moments of high stress or high conflict. The mooting experience is designed to help you with a real life experience of presenting and sharing and negotiating ideas in a court type format. So this can be a really difficult challenge. And my hope is that through 4 or 5 videos in this series, I help you understand a little bit about the nervous system. The mooting simulation, or any simulation or experiential learning for that matter, is designed to help train the nervous system, train the brain, mind, and body to show up for the self. And it's to teach us that we're actually safe in these environments and we can think our way through difficulty and come out successful. So what I want to do is support you with this from a mental health perspective, from a mental health and well-being lens. And that's what I'm here to do if you participate in all 5 videos that will be in the following series. So I'm going to bring up a highlight of the agenda and then frame for you this first video, which will end up being in and around the 20-minute mark. Each video in this 5-part series will be about 15 or 20 minutes and will highlight different components that have come up for mooting students in the past. This video has been designed in conjunction with Michaela Keat and some of the mooting coaches who have been through the experience in the past, who have supported students, and who know what the needs are when it comes to dealing with high stress and just managing difficult situations. So this introduction and overview is going to be a little bit about thinking like a lawyer and having conversations around the whole brain, mind, body connection when it comes to thinking like a lawyer. The next video will cover part 1 of the series, which is talking about high energy, high stakes, managing stress and emotions. Part 2, we're going to look at managing conflict and working with others, staying out of judgment and avoiding those toxic interactions that can sometimes get us in trouble when we're working in groups or in partnerships. In part 3, we're going to look at accepting critical feedback, coping with stress, and that doom spiral that can happen when we sometimes hear things that we don't want to hear, or when we're in situations and we're triggered. The last part of this series is going to talk about bouncing back from difficulty, because when we participate in experiences where we receive assessment, evaluation, and feedback, it can sometimes be hard. And I want to help you to build resilience and strength through this process. So if you are with me right through to the end, you'll receive about 80 to 100 minutes of professional development around an important topic in lawyering. And that's the topic of approaching our role as caregivers, supporters, healers, even through difficult situations. And that starts with the self. So that's why I see mental health and well-being as being essential components to lawyer training and professional development. And that's kind of the rationale behind why we're together today. So settle in and enjoy this first part, again, 15 or 20 minutes, just providing you with an introduction and overview. And then you can join us in the other videos for the remaining 4 parts aimed at helping you get through this experience this year, feeling good about all of your hard work, feeling good about the feedback, and feeling like you're able to launch forward with new skills and success. All right, let's go. So the first thing I want to talk about is this notion of what it means to think like a lawyer. You are in law school, you've probably been trained, read a lot about, and heard a lot about experiences around what it means to be a lawyer and what it means to embody that by thinking like a lawyer. When you hear this statement, you likely conjure up ideas related to analytical, strategic, logical thinking, which is very much true and highly needed in the profession. Sometimes what we don't think about, however, are the other counterbalancing emotional intelligences that are needed to support our intelligence quotient from the other side, that analytical, strategic, logistic perspective. We need both types of minds in our lawyers of the future. We need lawyers who can read and analyze and support good arguments for things that they are standing up for or against. And we need lawyers with a great deal of EQ who can manage emotions during difficult situations and who can stand up in the face of stress and sometimes toxic amounts of distress, because the profession calls on us to be present for others when they're dealing with difficulty. So we know that even though law school is difficult and it's a huge challenge for you that you've taken on in this, phase of your career and your development, one of life's other or even more important greatest challenges is being able to successfully regulate emotions. That is one of the hardest things that us humans will be called upon to do. You're going to be called upon to regulate your emotions in high stakes situations, not just in general arguments or conflicts with peers or colleagues or friends or family, but in situations where people are paying you and counting on you to be there for them during difficult times. So I want to talk to you about emotions and frame for you an understanding of the nervous system, how our emotions show up for us, what happens to the brain, mind, and body in big emotion, and just support a generalized understanding of that before I end this session with the idea of a thriver mindset, what it takes to thrive even during difficult situations. I'll frame that conversation using some of my research, and I'll frame most of our conversations in this 4 or 5 part mini series using research that is related to neuroscience, mental health, well-being, emotion management, and all things social emotional learning. So state-dependent functioning is an understanding of the fact that our bodies and our brains, the cognitive part of thinking, respond in different ways depending on our level of stress. And so typically when I'm calm, when I'm regulated and my emotions are managed and I'm feeling pretty grounded and connected to the world, safe, comfortable, happy, I can problem solve, I can think critically, I can be creative in my endeavors, I can use self-reflection to support and promote growth for myself and others, and I can make decisions clearly, kindly, and I feel strong and competent, even confident, in what I'm doing. I've got a great deal of self-worth. I feel pretty calm, cool, collected. Now, what happens under stress is those capacities start to diminish as stress increases. And that's what state-dependent functioning is. So I'm going to bring up a chart and show you that, walk you through that a little bit, and use that to frame the rationale for future conversations. So this chart around state-dependent functioning comes from Bruce Perry and Oprah Winfrey's work. They wrote a brilliant book together in 2021 titled What Happened to You? And it's about trauma and stress and the impact of that on us as human beings, but more importantly, how to understand trauma, stress, and distress, how our bodies react to that, and how to build and grow despite that, because we know that life is full of adverse experiences. If you are human and you've come this far along the journey, you know that life is hard. Life is tough. It's sometimes full of suffering. And when we are in those states of increased stress or increased distress, it becomes harder and harder to gather the mental capacity to be able to deal. It's very difficult to cope when we're under increased stress. And this chart shows us how and why that is. So if you look at the chart from the calm to a state of terror, and you go down the chart in the domains that it's describing here, it shows us that in the calm state, our functioning IQ level is very high. It's where it should be on our absolute best day. Now, if you've made it to university and into the College of Law, chances are you have an IQ, in the higher average to high range. And when you're calm, cool, and collected, like I am right now, your IQ stays where it's at. The minute our nervous system is alerted to potential for threat, and this threat can be real or perceived, there can actually be something or someone in the room to which I feel some degree of threat, or I start thinking about something that causes alarm or triggers me. For example, I've sent an email and I'm now worried that I've said the wrong thing to the wrong person. I've got a heightened state of alarm happening in my body. I'm just perseverating on or worrying about or hyper focused on something that isn't actually physical in the space. That can also increase my level of threat. The higher I go on this continuum towards alert, alarm, fear, and terror, even, the lower my IQ goes. So if you're looking along the bottom line there, you'll see that our IQ drops 10 to 20 points depending on our state of increased alarm. Now, what this is describing essentially is the fact that if we think of our brain in this handy model that Dan Siegel is the psychiatrist, psychologist who came up with the handy model of the brain, which fits quite nicely with showing that state. We have three parts of our brain that we like to think about when we talk about mental health. They are the amygdala, which is in the mid part of the brain, the limbic system, the prefrontal cortex or the cortex, which is the higher part of the brain. Our cognitive functioning is happening up here in this part of our brain. And then we have our brainstem, which is the back or lower part of our brain. And that's where all of our primitive, natural, reactive, unconscious actions and things are happening. So each level of the brain has a higher level of functioning and a job that it's supposed to do to keep us safe and alive, number one, and able to problem solve and manage through difficulty. That's how we're designed as humans. Now, when the brain is triggered, so mad, sad, scared, fight, flight, freeze, when something happens that triggers us into a state of alert or alarm or fear, the brain goes offline. I call it offline. And what I mean by that is this amygdala jumps into action. It starts controlling the show and it takes over for us so that we can survive a difficult situation. We don't want to be able to think our way through fear. If there is a physical present threat in the room, we don't want to be able to stop and think about what to do. We want to save our life and we want to do it pretty immediately and pretty quickly. That requires no thinking, only action. The problem is when the amygdala jumps into action, it causes the rest of our brain to go offline. Thinking shuts down, even digestion can shut down. All systems in the body beyond those that respond to adrenaline, like our limbs, our feet, our hands, they kick into action and they prepare to fight or they prepare to help us run. And in worst case scenarios, just completely shut down because there's nothing else we can do and nothing's happening. So that's why when we're in states of alarm, we're not able to think. And you might have noticed that in some of your life experiences. You get a phone call, someone's on the other end of the phone call, and they're telling you something that's alarming or scary. Your heart might start racing. That's preparing your body for fight or flight. You might start having racing thoughts. Even things are foggy or incoherent, and they're just generally chaotic in the body. Again, when we're in that state of heightened alert, heightened alarm, fear, or terror, our cognitive functioning ability decreases. Our capacity to think decreases. Now, why am I telling you this? Because it's important that as a lawyer, you are able to maintain the analytical skills of problem solving, synthesizing, reflecting even, and communicating coherent and logical arguments, even when you might be triggered. And when you are in the mooting experience, it might be triggering because it's new to you, because you're being challenged or questioned. You have a lot to remember and a lot to do. And later, when you're in the courtroom, you might be triggered by, an opposing party, another lawyer, or a client even, or a judge who's also questioning you or challenging you. And, you will have prepared for this experience likely when you're online and pretty calm. and then land in the courtroom and receive a challenge from someone that triggers you, or even the content of what you're doing or supporting is triggering. And the more triggering it is, the more offline you are, and therefore the lower your cognitive capacity. Now, this is a good news, bad news story, because when we know this information, we can work to calm the nervous system when it's triggered and get back online into the thinking part of our brain, raise our cognitive functioning capacity so that we can move through things and not be in states of alarm, fear, or terror. So I'm teaching you a little bit about this so that you have the awareness to understand what's happening when your body is triggered, and then how you can calm it, get back online, and move through the job you were meant to do. Each of the videos in this 4 or 5 part series is going to attack this in a little bit of a different way. We're going to look at this through self-care, through managing conflict, through connection and conversation and building resilience, dealing with the doom spiral that happens when we are triggered into alarm or fear based on something someone said to us. And my hope is that by the end of this, like I said, 80 to 100 minutes, you feel pretty strong in terms of some understanding of your brain, mind, body connection, how to get control of that, ground yourself, and move through stress despite it being difficult, and bounce back from that even stronger so that you can face new adversity, new difficulty with some degree of regulation and calm. And that way you're going to be able to do the best you can in this difficult challenge that you've taken on in the profession that you've chosen. So I'm going to show you what this looks like in a little bit of a different way. We've got, Bruce Perry is a very neurosequential thinker. A lot of his work has to deal with what's happening in the neurophysiology of the brain. Hence, he breaks things down from the cortex, the limbic system, the brainstem, and then looks at the different adaptive functioning that's happening from that neurophysiological level. But we also have research that comes from polyvagal theory that's looking at the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our body that's kind of running through and supporting all of our organs to show up for us. And the vagus nerve and polyvagal theory is one way of understanding all of the sensations, the feelings, and the actions that come along with these neurophysiological states. So I'm going to bring that up here just to show you what you might be thinking or feeling or sensing as you're moving through states of calm, alert, alarm, fear, and terror. And this is where you can self-identify and recognize, okay, I know what sends me into a state of alarm. And it's different for each person. I might be sent into a state of alarm sitting in one of your legal classes because it's out of context for me. I maybe have never attended any of those classes before and don't know your professor on the level that you know them. And just sitting there might cause me to go from calm to alert. For you, you might be in a class and sitting there quite calmly on any given day, but move from calm to alert if you're asked to answer a question. For others, being asked to answer a question might send them into a state of alarm or fear, even depending on their life experience. So we know that all of us as human beings are different in how we move through these continuums. And what I want you to be able to do is just understand, how does your nervous system work? How does it respond to stress and threat? And then therefore, what can you do about it? So in a state of calm, this is the place where we feel the safest, and we can tend and befriend and engage in all kinds of social emotional things because we're present, alert, flexible, open, connected, mindful, compassionate, all the great things that as human beings we want to be. We're regulated. Our breathing is pretty static and calm, and we're able to sleep. And we have the desire for health and connection in this state. We can do all the things that human beings were designed to do. As we move into states of alert and alarm, these are places where our safety might be threatened. Again, it can be real threat or perceived threat. Our minds can make up a lot of threats that don't actually exist. We call that the story we tell ourselves, or the stories that we tell ourselves. Brene Brown calls these the shitty first drafts, in the sense that we are very apt as human beings to make up stories about threat where it doesn't exist. Why on earth would that happen to us? Well, it's because we're meant to be wired to constantly pay attention to what's happening in our environment, scan and perceive and understand what our level of threat might be at any given moment. So we're ready to protect ourselves or connect with others who can help us. That's why we're just so susceptible to going down the spiral or down the drain with our stinking thinking. And I'm going to get to talking about that in probably part 3 of this journey. So in this state of heightened alert, we might be afraid, we might be agitated or frustrated. Those are words we might use to describe how we're feeling, a little bit irritated, definitely dysregulated, and that might be disrupting our ability to connect with self and others. In states of alarm and even fear, I'll bring them both up here, we have heightened adrenaline and cortisol running through the body. We've got these stress hormones that are just jumping into action. We can feel hopeless. We can feel shame or blame, alarm, panic, worry. These are all words that describe how we're feeling in these states. We can feel shut down and trapped, and that can cause us to act in certain ways. Or we can feel a little bit disoriented. Our hearing, our seeing, our smelling, our senses, our touch can be dysregulated in these places. And that's why people say, I couldn't focus, I couldn't think, I couldn't hear anything, my ears were ringing. The higher the state of alarm goes, the more our systems are in disarray and potentially in shutdown. If we reach a state of terror, now this would be the state that someone might be in if they were having a panic attack where they have perceived a threat to the point of terror. Now, I have a panic disorder and I have panic attacks. It's been a long time since I've had one, but I have experienced this where my body thinks there is a reason to react in such fear that I'm almost frozen by my thoughts, right? There's no actual physical threat in the room. If anybody looked around, they wouldn't see a threat, but I feel one. My entire system is compromised. I might be disassociated, feeling a great deal of mental or physical pain, and my breath and chest might be tight. I might find it hard to breathe. The world's closing in on me. And I'm just using up all of my energy to save my life metaphorically in this state. So I just want you to think about, what things in life move you through this state dependent functioning, and where might you be with your cognitive capacity when you're there? Because what we don't want to be doing is making key decisions, especially those that involve important things for ourselves or others, when we are in states of alarm or fear or terror, right? Because they're not going to be the best decisions. Our cognitive capacity is a lot lower than it is when we are calm or just alert. And I would say most people who are doing a job that they love, passionate about what they're doing, enjoying their experiences, are in this state of calm/alert. And that's a healthy place to be. That's in one of these first 2 areas where we have just a little bit of agitation or a little bit of awareness of things happening in the world that might be difficult, but they're not overwhelming us. They're not sending us into sensory deprivation or disorientation. So I would invite you to pause this if you wanted to do any kind of reflection and just think about things in your professional life or your personal life at school or work or elsewhere that move you through these states. And if you can recognize when you are in a certain state and then use strategies to calm your nervous system and bring it back down, then you are going to be in the greatest place possible to face difficulty. So I apologize, my clock is chiming there in the background and it's probably high noon, so it's going to go a full 12 chimes. But hopefully you can pause and think about that and just jot down some things that you recognize in yourself as you move and things that help to calm you. And I am going to talk about that in future videos. Breath work, journaling, movement, healthy eating and sleep. They're all the things we know about. that help to calm the nervous system. And the more of them we do, the better off we are in being able to cope with these states and bring ourselves back down to being online and being able to think cognitively through difficult situations. That's where I want you to be, versus in states of chronic intolerance or discomfort, right? If we are just not managing stress, rolling through the motions, doing our best, just living on the edge in stress, we're going to have, a pervasive sense of dissatisfaction. We're going to be riding a roller coaster of life versus kind of riding the waves of life. And that can send us into toxic behaviors where we are trying to cope, but we're not doing it very healthfully or adaptively. We're coping by using drugs or alcohol or social media or other addictions that can manifest, in a variety of ways via overuse of gambling as a means of calming the nervous system, over shopping, over caffeinating. There's all kinds of ways that we can try to calm the nervous system that don't actually work. They're like short-term solutions to this aversion or this dysfunction or disorder that's happening in the system. I don't want you to be there. I want you to be in a healthy state where you can regulate and support yourself adaptively and healthfully to calm and manage and cope. So as we go through this entire journey over the next few sessions, aware, care, and cope are the three components of the human curriculum that I use to help you to understand how to manage, monitor the nervous system. And you'll hear me use that language quite a bit. So what this kind of boils down to is understanding that when we resist things or pretend like they're not there or they're not happening, Carl Jung refers to it as what we resist persists, then we can create more perpetual energy that's pushing back against the world with little to no gain. That which we resist persists. So if we pretend like we don't have stress, or if we don't properly manage it, we're like trying to push back against this giant rock that's not even going to budge, but we're using up a lot of energy to do this. Where I want you to be is in a state where you can embrace and face, whether it's difficult or whether it's engaging. I want you to be able to embrace the world, good, bad, or ugly, and have the skills to cope and manage through that. That's what the human curriculum is. It is a framework for understanding that we've got all these things going on inside our bodies, in the world around us, and there are places for which we have a great deal of control, and that control starts with the self. So really, this series is about getting to know you and getting to know the parts of you that show up to help you and how you can use them to your advantage to successfully execute things like mooting and other experiential aspects of the next few years of your life. And then you can bring those skills into your professional career and show up for you and experience success. So I do this through 10 pillars of the human curriculum, and I'm just going to bring them up. Not going to talk about them too much because you're going to see these things showing up throughout all of our sessions together in this professional development endeavor. So the roots of this work come from my research, where I've worked with people in difficult situations. I've studied educators who are thriving in the profession, educators who are struggling students at risk at all levels, from post-secondary to elementary and secondary levels. I've spoken to first-year law classes, and we've looked at their level of thriving in the past. And what I've generally collated from my experience with people who are anywhere from barely surviving to thriving in the profession is that they have some fundamental things that are a part of who they are that speak to their ability to be successful. And that is having meaning and purpose in their work, having a mindset that's able to shift from the negative to the positive, something related to optimism and seeing the glass half full despite facing adversity. They have a good core understanding of mental health, which you should have when we're done here. They embrace mentorship, see themselves as mentors and also as mentees. They manage emotions in difficult times and stress, and they build resilience, relationship, routines, resources, and use self-reflection in order to keep their capacity for all things wellness, and all things doing good work, which is what I hope for you to be able to do. So these things collate into what I call a thriver mindset, which is a mindset that I described when I did some work with what we called pandemic thrivers. Teachers through the pandemic had some of the hardest jobs. We know doctors and nurses and people in hospitals had very difficult physical jobs supporting people. But during the pandemic, educators were tasked with the cognitive tasks of keeping students in classrooms, supporting their well-being, taking care of themselves. It was a very difficult shift in the teacher role over, especially the first 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. When I studied teachers, I went specifically in to look at educators who were thriving during that time. And these are some of the things I learned from them about what it means to have a thriver mindset that I think applies directly to your work as lawyers as well. So those with a thriver mindset could adapt and embrace change rather quickly. They were innovative, they were risk takers in their role, and they were most certainly resilient through difficulty. Thrivers had a relational capacity that supported them to build relationships and networks. And they had these mentor-mentee relationships where they were able to experience success among other groups of people. They were growth-oriented, optimistic, curious, despite it being difficult. They were continuously learning about new ways to pivot in challenging and changing times. And the thrivers that we worked with, basically embodied this notion of what we call reciprocity. It's a give and take. It's understanding that when I work on myself, I'm able to give that back to community, to others, that humans thrive through connection and mutual support. And through that, we can build resilience. I can model resilience and build resilience through these relationships and these connections. So I also hope for you to develop a thriver mindset through this mooting experience and take that with you into your personal and professional lives. So this final component is going to be something that sets us up for thinking about our skills and our strengths as we go through the remainder of this presentation. I know this first video is probably bridging on about the 45-minute mark, and the remainder will be quite a bit shorter, but I had to cover introduction and then some components here to get you going. Before I leave you today, I'd like you to spend the last 5 minutes thinking about your strengths. And I do this in a particular manner. I would like you to take a blank piece of paper, pause and go get one if you need to, and draw out what I call a 3 chart that has 1 column for I know I am, 1 column for I might be, and a final column for I'm not or I'm not yet. You can look at it however you want. The yet added to the final column brings in that growth mindset. So it doesn't mean that I'm not or I'll never be, but I'm just not quite there yet. I'm going to list a variety of components of what it means to be human, descriptors, personality features, traits. And as they each come up, I want you to put them in the column where you think it applies to describe you. So if you haven't already grabbed a piece of paper and a pen to create your 3 chart, please pause and do that now. And I'll pull up the words and let's see what some of your strengths are and where they lie. So the first word is strong. And I want you to decide, where does that fit for you? I know I am strong. Is it I might be strong? Or I'm not strong yet? These are self-descriptors. You decide, put the words where you feel they belong. Interesting. And I'm just going to run through each of these rather quickly and leave it to you to pause the video if you need time to think about which column these descriptors go in for you. A good friend. Supportive. a good listener, organized, respectful, outgoing, compassionate, kind, hardworking, understanding, independent, patient, smart or knowledgeable, brave, reliable, responsible, fun, there's a good one, caring, resilient, giving, empathetic. And I think that's it. I'll just check if there's one more. Open. Okay, so I could have listed any number of descriptors on here. I just picked a bunch of random ones that apply to those of us who are leaders and learners in different environments, as you might be. You can feel free to pause and add more to the list if you want to, but I'd like you to get a good sense. Look at your 3 chart on the page in front of you, and what are your strengths? What are the qualities that you know are true to be you? What are the qualities that might be you and just require a little bit of refining? My hope is that your I know I am and I might be list is much larger than the I am not or I am not yet list. And these are the qualities that are in these first 2 columns are qualities I want you to use. I want you to count on to support self-worth, self-compassion, confidence, competence, aka self-esteem, and strength for your ability to get through the mooting experience, but also to launch into the remainder of your schooling and a successful professional career, knowing that you're going to only build on these strengths and capacities as you go. So thanks for spending the last 45 minutes or so with me in this introduction and overview to thinking about the brain-mind-body connection, some of our strengths that are going to support our capacity to be well, but also be strong in the roles that call us to be strong. So we'll see you in the next few videos. Part 1 will be next, and we'll move through the remainder of them as we go. Thanks for joining me today.